right. Hello, hello. Hey, Elizabeth. Hope you're doing well. Can you hear the music? I think I should turn it up a little bit. Hey, Zena. I'm excited for today. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Gonna give you some waves. So exciting. Comments about your day so far. It's Friday, so... Oh, new handle. That's exciting. It's Friday and it's pretty hot out in the bay. Hello, hello everyone. I see some new faces and then some faces from last week, so this is exciting. For people who came last week, this will build on it a little bit, and then for people who didn't come last week, that's totally cool. You'll just learn new stuff. Someone let me know if you can hear the music. I like it. What does that say? Just got out of a hot attic installing an air conditioner. I like the irony around that, but I hope it starts working. How hot is it where I am? I think it's like 80 degrees, but also I'm upstairs, so like the air conditioning downstairs doesn't super well go upstairs. Can't hear the music. Okay, faintly. Alright, well that's good enough. Yeah, okay, we'll get started in another 2 minutes, but just let me know what's up. How's the weather? How are you doing? What are those emojis? I could turn it up a little bit. I don't know. Pretty cool in SF. Treble clefs. Oh, gotcha. Okay, that's what the emojis were. Yeah, SF is nice and cool. Let's see. It's 85 degrees in northern Indiana. Wow, you're coming from a long way. Welcome, Chris Evans. Hope you're excited. We'll get started in 1 more minute. Got my iced water here. Hello. This is so exciting. Alright, and it is 4:05 PST, and we shall get started. Alright, hello friends. My name is Grace Kwak, and I'm a summer intern with About Face, the organization that combines media literacy with social justice. So excited for this part too. Thank you, Zena. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am born and raised and am currently in the Bay Area, so in San Jose, where it is fairly hot today. And super excited. In about 2 months, I'll be going down to UCLA, majoring in electrical engineering. Cool. So I'm so excited that you're here today for my part 2. I especially want to welcome teen girls, so girls with an asterisk. So self-identified and including non-binary folks. And specifically, if you're interested in getting a more comprehensive sex ed than what school did, if you came last week, you learned a bit about that. And if you didn't come last week, you can see the replay on IGTV. So yeah, teen girls are kind of who I have made this talk for, but if you're a parent or just another older adult, this definitely, there's still definitely things that you can get from this talk. The one thing that I will say, hello Brianna. The one thing that I will say is girls who are in middle school or below, this may not be for you yet, because it's, I don't know, your bodies are still developing and sex is kind of a, like, big old, takes a lot of self-knowledge and decision-making skills, I think. So yeah, that's who I am. That's who I am directing this talk for. And before we get started, just some disclaimers again from last week. The first and foremost one is I'm not encouraging you to have sex or not. Asexual people, I see you. It's just that you deserve to have an education. Ooh, I got a heart. Thank you. You deserve to have an education because knowledge is power. Second disclaimer, I'm not a sexologist. I don't have a degree in human sexuality. But with that said, I didn't make up any of this information. I've done research, just looking at things and credible sources. Third disclaimer, there won't be any explicit images here, so you don't have to brace yourself for that. Number 4, all the resources that I mentioned will be on a document that I'll share at the end of this IG Live, so definitely don't worry about, like, not being able to find something. And finally, please ask questions. I am here for you and definitely like to know that I am not just talking to myself. And yeah, I'm excited and I hope you are too. Cool, so as you may or may not remember, last week we talked about consent, which is super important and super basic because you deserve to not get assaulted is a pretty low bar for when it comes to your sexual life. So, hold on. Are we still? I think we're still good. Okay. Not sure what happened there. There we go. But yeah, I have a slide as just a quick recap of what we learned last week about the many aspects of consent. But consent is not where the conversation around sex should end. So, cueing today's topic about intimate justice. So, for some background on intimate justice, in today's world, I think it's pretty difficult to navigate sexuality today, especially if you identify as a woman or a girl, because there's a lot of shame and a lot of cultural expectations, beauty standards in the media, advertising, and labels also meant to shame specifically women and girls. And there's expectations of who you should and shouldn't be, what you should and shouldn't do. And so intimate justice steps in to address these problems in our society. So with that in mind, do you have any ideas on what intimate justice might mean? You can drop your thoughts in the comments down below. So, I'll read the comments as they come in, but the way that the concept of intimate justice is explained by a journalist named Peggy Ornstein is that sex, and I'll quote her here, sex has political as well as personal implications, just like who does the dishes in your house or who vacuums the rug. And it raises similar issues about inequality, economic disparity, violence, physical and mental health. Intimate justice asks us to consider who's entitled to engage in an experience, who's entitled to enjoy it, who's the primary beneficiary, and how does each partner define good enough. So that's kind of a lot to take in. How I like to think of it just kind of as a simpler idea is applying feminism to sexuality, especially because female sexuality is something that the media has problematic portrayals of, but we'll get into that later. And yeah, so it's safe to say that we're feminists and we want to have feminism in all aspects of our life. But how do we get this intimate justice thing? Before we get there, I do want to point out that the idea of intimate justice is heteronormative, so it does assume that in a sexual relationship, there's a man and a woman. So I want to recognize that not all relationships are like that. And I'm sure there is more research about, people of other sexualities and how intimate justice might apply to them. But this still stands as an idea that does apply to straight people. But yeah, so intimate justice for straight women identifying people out there. I have a question for you. How do we achieve it? That's a big question. I have another quote that I'll use to kind of, I guess, get us thinking about this. So, the best place to start is that here we go. A quote from Scarlettine explaining how to start with intimate justice. The best place to start is to know that you, as a person, are worthwhile. You're worth fighting for. You deserve good things in your life. You deserve healthy relationships that make you feel good. You deserve to feel at peace with your body. And if you're interested in sex, be it by yourself or with partners, you deserve pleasure and joy. So basically, you deserve good things in your life. And if you want sex to be that, then you deserve to have it. You're probably already thinking about how oftentimes heterosexual men are portrayed as the ones who get to have pleasure rather than women, and we'll get into that more later, so keep thinking. And so there are some sub-themes within this idea of intimate justice that we're going to go into today. The first one is that you deserve to feel pleasure, and the second one is that sex is not a performance, it's more like an adventure. And the third one is that you are your own expert. So we'll explain more of that later. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. But with that, we're going to get started with our first theme, which is you deserve pleasure in your intimate relationships. And for that, I have a story for you. So, I'm going to start off with a pretty generic story about two straight teens who are having intercourse, which is penis and vagina sex, for the very first time. Ooh. So, our main character is going to be the straight cis girl. She loves her boyfriend, and her boyfriend loves her back. He's never pressured her, and he's, a good guy. They've made out before, they've explored manual and oral sex, and the boyfriend expresses interest in having sex, and the girl's not, 100% sure if she's ready, but she can be alright with it. And And soon enough, there's a day when his parents are going out of town. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we don't get a lot of opportunities like this, so maybe they want to do the deed. So they get condoms, they go into his room, and it's fairly brief, so he gets off pretty quickly, but she doesn't. And she's like, well, it's pretty normal for the first time. And it also hurts her a little bit, but it wasn't terribly painful like she was expecting it would be. And then afterwards, they do feel closer to each other. They think it's special, and they feel good about it. And then when the day's over, she feels lucky and happy with it. So it's kind of like the typical ideal first time. And on the surface, it does seem pretty good. Thinking about last week with our focus on consent, there was consent. So great. And there was also contraception. They used a condom. And also an emphasis on, or at least an understanding of how it would affect the relationship. So there was that emotional connection. But there's something missing in this story. And it's kind of hard to guess if you haven't really thought about it, but there's kind of a big aspect of this experience that is missing, like something that at least the girl in the story, the narrator, did not feel. If you have any guesses on what that is, you can drop them in the comments. I'll give you a couple seconds. Okay, so the thing that was missing from the story is the girl's desire. So it is fine to just have consent, but there's something more. It seems like, especially in culture, women and girls are kind of taught that sex is something that they maybe try to avoid, or I don't know, it's something that they aren't really portrayed as wanting. And so it makes sense that it makes sense that a good experience with your first time would just be that, oh, like, it didn't hurt. But what if girls were raised with the knowledge that women experience, initiate, and pursue desire, and it's completely acceptable to do that with a lot of excitement and a lot of desire? And what if good sex for girls wasn't just the absence of pain, and it wasn't just about emotional intimacy, but it could feel great. So, any thoughts on that? Good? Bad? It's definitely, at least I think, a lot different than the current cultural thought. Hello, Jenna White Swan. So yeah, the point of this story is to segue into kind of a vision or dream, I guess, for how we might want to shift the conversation around female sexuality. So I think that we have the power to think about and dream, and also maybe even put into action the idea of female sexuality being more than just a woman being able to say yes or no, but of a woman being able to express her desire and feel pleasure from it. So yeah. So this brings us to the question of, where did we learn that women don't experience and pursue sexual desire in the first place? Well, considering that this is an about-face presentation, you might be able to guess that the answer is from the media. That's one of the ways that we learn that women don't feel sexual in their own right. So, for example, Britney Spears had to say oops before she did it again. Any thoughts on why she had to say oops before she did it again? That hinges on interpreting the song as doing it again as some sort of sexual engagement. But yeah, you can drop your thoughts in the comment section below. But yeah, so saying oops implies that having sex, expressing her sexual desire wasn't something that she meant to do. Because in mainstream media, girls can feel sexual, but it's not something they completely intend or purposefully pursue. And I do want to point out that the situation is getting better. So lately there are more positive songs about female sexuality, but I would argue that it's still not all the way. We're still at this, oops, I did it again, rather than atta girl. Cool. Would love to hear your thoughts. But if not, we'll go on to our second media example. So this one isn't so much as one example, but a general trend. So MPAA ratings. So these are the ones that say, how appropriate a movie is. So what I find to be very interesting is that the MPAA tends to rate films where a woman is clearly enjoying sex as more explicit than if it were a man. So, for example, if there's a blowjob in a movie, then it's typically rated as R, so the second to last bar. But if there's oral sex scenes that feature women on the receiving end, it's NC-17, so the bottom bar. Wow. So it's the exact same thing, Jen says, of course. It's the exact same thing, except that the person receiving the oral sex is the other gender. So what message do you think is being sent about women's sexualities versus men's sexualities with this new knowledge? I'll give you a second to think about it. Well, so, oh, hello, new person. If we rate women enjoying sex as more explicit than men enjoying sex, then we kind of imply, or we do imply, that it's normal and healthy and, fine, socially acceptable for men to enjoy sex, but for women, it's, wrong and immoral and, according to the MPAA, you shouldn't have anyone under 17 see that kind of thing. And it also leads to young women maybe wanting to stifle their sexualities, to think that it's something dirty and something that they should be ashamed of. Any thoughts on that? Cool. Well, if you have more thoughts, definitely drop them in the comments section. So, the third and final example I have about women's sexuality being portrayed in mainstream media. Oh, Jenna White Swan says, women often feel shame for sex and desire, but the more we talk about it, the more comfortable we will become. Yes, I love that. Thank you for your comment. So, the third example I have is a little bit different than the other media examples. It's from a show. It's from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And there's an episode where the woman, one of the women in the show, Maya, is talking to her colleague Tim about something called the orgasm gap. And she says, did you know that studies show that women only orgasm 39% of the time during sex, while men finish 91% of the time? And of course he does not know. And he's also shocked to realize that the electric toothbrush that his wife loves might be something that she doesn't actually use as a toothbrush. Might be something that she uses to masturbate. And on the one hand, it is at least a step forward that the media is talking about, the orgasm gap, that it's like bringing it to light. But there is a problem here, and it's that Tim is portrayed as like, and I'm quoting an article, but like benignly incompetent, as clueless, and that kind of gets men off the hook for being accountable for making sure that the women in their relationship also feel pleasure. How does this make you feel? Any thoughts so far? All right, well, we're gonna dig deeper into this thing that the media brought us to called the orgasm gap. So I have this chart here, and you can't see it super well, but it's okay, I'll explain it. But it's a chart of the orgasm gap by people's sexuality, and I will point out that this isn't all the sexualities that exist, but it goes straight men at the top, gay men, bisexual men, lesbian women, bisexual women, and straight women. And you can see that, so, hold on. Yes. So you can see that 89% of, at the top. Reeling it back. Okay, the orgasm gap is a statistical disparity in orgasm frequency, and it usually refers to partners who are having heterosexual sex, and hopefully there will be more research in the future about how the orgasm gap varies by things like race, class, age, and ability. But for now, the orgasm gap usually refers to partners having heterosexual sex. So, as you can kind of see, straight men, 95% say they usually or always orgasm when being sexually intimate, but only 65% of heterosexual women said the same. So that's a really big gap. So the big question that this leads us to is why? Why does this happen? Any thoughts? Any ideas? How do you feel? Are you surprised? Not surprised? Well, one pretty common, I think, it's not really an argument, but like a common like thing to think is that like, oh, women's bodies are more complicated and it's like biologically more difficult for women to orgasm than men. But if you look closely, actually at this same chart, we notice something pretty interesting. So women orgasm 86% of the time when they have sex with other women. So that's the lesbian women bar, the purple one. And it's only during sex with men, so the bottom bar, the pink one, where they orgasm only 65% of the time. So, given this, what do we think about why the orgasm gap exists? So, it's not a biological cause, because the orgasm gap, like, significantly decreases when women have sex with other women. It's just, like, a significantly bigger gap when women have sex with men. So, if it's not biological, then it's something about the way that women and men do it. So, it seems like from our culture, we know how to pleasure men, but maybe we don't know how to pleasure women. Lack of communication / knowledge of our bodies, for sure. And why do we not know about our bodies, our culture, and why does our culture not tell us how we feel pleasure? Sexism. And one element of culture, which is super big, is the media. So I have some media examples for you. Society, ! Yes. So, heterosexual sex in the media is defined by what gets men off. So, here's a pretty classic example when you think of sex in mainstream media. In 50 Shades of Grey, the first scene, the woman is very submissive and the man is dominant. There's a lot of thrusting, it's penetrative sex, and that's what's glorified. So what we're teaching is that men should be the initiators of sex, and that women do orgasm through penetrative sex, and that's what they should want, questionably. Not even to mention that being submissive is something that is eroticized. Also brings up the idea that women only orgasm through penetrative sex, and if they don't, then sex ends when a man climaxes, which is a super sexist idea. The next media example I have is from a popular show, Normal People. Probably someone here watches it. But another thing about how sex is portrayed in the media is that it's often shown through, like, a male gaze. So it's like a close-up of a woman's face as she's having an orgasm through penetrative sex. And there's also, this is kind of an aside, but there's a lot of breasts and there's not a lot of penises. Although Normal People does break that convention. So, heterosexual sex in the media defined by what gets men off. Penetrative sex. Apparently, we conveniently, we portray what gets women off as what gets men off. And as we know, hello Amanda Jean, as we know in real life with the orgasm gap, this doesn't happen. In fact, over 70% of receptive partners, so people with vaginas, who are like, the idea is like receiving a penis, over 70% of receptive partners don't orgasm through vaginal intercourse all by itself. The real deal, where it's at, for female anatomy is clitoral stimulation. So, we're gonna have a mini anatomy lesson. When we look closer at biology, because when we look closer at biology, instead of asking why women don't orgasm through the typical definition of sex, which is sexual intercourse, or to like penis and vagina, the real question is, why would they orgasm through intercourse? Because the clitoris is where it's at. So I'm going to show you a few diagrams of female reproductive anatomy, so that's coming. So a lot of people think that, oh, the clitoris is just like this tiny little thing, like a little gland, kind of at the it's hard, I know you can't see me pointing. But the clitoris is actually, there's an internal part of it and an external part of it, so that's like the whole clitoris. And it's not just like a little thing that maybe provides pleasure. That's what I was taught that it wasn't in my sex ed class. But yeah, the clitoris is external as well as external, and the whole thing's a lot bigger than what it just looks like on the outside. So, more fun facts about the clitoris. It's usually the most sensitive spot on the vulva, so the vulva being the, like, referring to all the external genitals of people assigned at birth. It has more sensory nerve endings than any other part of the body. It's got twice the number of sensory nerve endings that the penis does. And it interacts with over 15,000 nerve endings throughout the whole pelvic area. It also gets erect and can get up to 3 times larger, and is almost the same size as a penis. As opposed to the vagina, which only refers to the internal passage leading from the opening of the vulva to the cervix of the uterus. The vagina has very few sensory nerve endings. And if you've heard of something called the G-spot, based on everything that we know to date, if the G-spot is an actual thing, it's likely that is actually part of the internal clitoris. So everything in this very quick anatomy lesson is pointing to the idea that biologically, women would get off from clitoral stimulation, not society's made definition of sex as penetrative sex. Any thoughts so far? I was totally, like, mind blown when I learned this. Like, I think that they told us briefly about the clitoris during sex ed, but I definitely didn't know that, like it's got twice the number of sensory nerve endings than the penis does. So yeah, the real question that we should be asking, instead of blaming women for not being able to orgasm through penetrative sex, is why would any vagina-owning person at all enjoy intercourse or vaginal entry? Or why can some at all reach orgasm that way? So, there is an answer to this. And it looks a little bit like this. So, when there's pressure inside the vagina, in more of a wide way than a long way, whether it's with like a penis, fingers, or a sex toy, that can put pressure on all of the parts in the vulva area. And so it's more likely to stimulate the clitoris, especially when a person is super aroused. because then the clitoris is all like puffed up. And so it's kind of like, as described in another book that I've read, it's kind of like a Rube Goldberg machine. The idea of trying to orgasm through, the idea of trying to have a vaginal orgasm, so like having an orgasm through penetrative sex, is basically just, like, the extent that that is possible is just the extent that that can simulate your clitoris. So, yeah, so Masters and Johnson, which is another, like, considered to be, like, super experts on human sexuality, their theory was that women should be able to orgasm during intercourse because the penis moves the labia, which in turn moves the clitoral hill, which in turn moves the clitoris. In this book that I read, which I'll be talking about more in a second, the author rightfully joked that this sequence of events sounds more like a Rube Goldberg scheme than a reliable way to orgasm. Any thoughts so far? That we expect women to orgasm just because from something that that gets men to orgasm? Cool. Well, more on this book. Oops. Oh goodness. Figuring this out. More on this book. It's called The Height Report. I think that I'm saying it correctly. But it was and still is revolutionary. I was reading descriptions of it, and, like, there's a quote that said, like, it's a sexual revolution in 600 pages. It is quite long, as you can see. So the book, so famous in the old days. Oh, really? I've never heard about it. Okay, well, a woman named Cher Height, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but she sent questionnaires to 3,000 women of all ages, professions, and geographical locations. Note that this doesn't include race, so I feel like this means that it's probably pretty biased toward white women, but this still sheds light on female sexuality. She asked them everything about sex, orgasm, masturbation, and she composed a book of their replies. And the women speak in their own words, and it's pretty fascinating, and the overall findings are quite surprising. So, the myth that all women should orgasm automatically from intercourse. Well, of the 82% of women who said that they masturbated, the Height Report found that 95% said that they could orgasm easily and regularly whenever they wanted. And most women orgasm through clitoral stimulation. And earlier when we saw that the orgasm gap is a lot lower in lesbian sex, there's a lot of clitoral stimulation in that. So, interesting. The Height Report brought about, like, a new theory of female sexuality. So this is a quote from Cher Height. And it's not, so this is the quote. So, it's not that women have a problem sexually, but that society has a problem accepting and understanding women's sexuality. I conclude that since sex is a historically and culturally constructed institution, not strictly a matter of biology or mechanics, the definition of sex can be changed and indeed should be changed. How does this make you feel? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Any thoughts? Well, my mind was blown. Okay, so what you might be wondering now. Totally agree. Awesome, Jen. What you might be wondering now is if I can find my slide. Okay, here we are. So, why are we talking about the orgasm gap? Why does it matter? Now, you may argue that it's not like the wage gap. You might argue that's like a much bigger thing, and granted, like, yeah, wages are a pretty big deal in our capitalist society, in our capitalist world even. And yes, part of that is true. But even though a woman's orgasm might not seem as important as her salary, both can empower and fulfill her. Sexuality is still a part of her life. In short, equality matters. And just as when women aren't paid the same as men for the same work, their work is devalued. When women don't receive the same pleasure as men do during sex, their pleasure is devalued. So it's kind of a matter of principle. Like sexual equality, no one is more or less worthy of care, respect, and pleasure, whether you're inside of the bedroom or in the boardroom. And I also, I do want to point out that there's nothing wrong with not having orgasms, because in some cases it's just not possible. But again, it's a matter of principle, it's a matter of choice. So if a woman knows how to have an orgasm but can't make this part of sex with another person, then she doesn't have the power to choose whether or not she can have an orgasm yet. So the question is of power. Equality matters. And finally, I have a quote that I think is quite hilarious and quite great, but it's, oh my goodness, slide issues today, sorry about that. Whoever said orgasm wasn't important for a woman was undoubtedly a man. Any thoughts on that? I definitely thought it was hilarious, but a little bit sad in how true it is, at least what I think. But yeah, if you have thoughts, definitely comment below. I'll give you a couple seconds to just let that quote sink in. Okay, well, I want to close on something a little more general. We're getting there. So, I'm going to end on a quote by Peggy Orenstein, who is the author of Girls and Sex, Boys and Sex, Cinderella Ate My Daughter, and a bunch of other books on girls and women. And in Cinderella Ate My Daughter, I think she also, this is at the end of the book, I'm going to read you a quote from her, which I really love. Oh, hey, Aoife. Okay, she says, I object strenuously to the sexualization of girls, but not necessarily to girls having sex. I do, however, want her to understand why she's doing it. Not for someone else's enjoyment, not to keep a boyfriend from leaving, and not because everyone else is. I want her to do it for herself. I want her to explore and understand her body's responses, her own pleasure, her own desire. I want her to be able to express her needs in a relationship, to say no when she needs to value reciprocity, and to experience true intimacy. Yay! Cool. A couple final notes. Oh, no worries, Aoife. A couple final notes. I want to give you a plug to follow Aoife's Instagram account. Aoife's the other intern with About Face. But Girls Project 180 is the About Face Teens Instagram account and was designed to give youth a platform to share what they've created and talk about issues that they care about. Yeah, Jen says yay. We're super excited about that. And then after that, I have my resource list again. So if you're curious about all things sex and sexuality, definitely go there. You'll see all of the resources that I use to make this presentation, and definitely a lot more. So that'll keep you busy. We're almost done. The other thing that I want to remind you is to stay tuned for the About Face. Stay tuned on the About Face Instagram page, because we'll be we'll be looking for more of your thoughts on the topics of consent and intimate justice, and also what you can do about it. So there's that. Cool. And I want to close on a nice uplifting photo. So, especially when it comes to sex, body image is something that comes up. So, like the idea that women are expected to shave their pubic hair, that they're expected to smell a certain way, to look perfect like they do in the movies. And so I want to end on, or I guess I challenge you and encourage you to end this session with a self-affirmation. So you've got all these media messages, societal expectations, beauty ideals telling you that you need to shave down there, ? And that, like, your natural smell and sounds, that they are less than beautiful. But I want to combat that. I want to combat that. So I invite you to just take a second and think about something that you like about yourself, your natural self, something that you want to embrace and remind yourself of as you continue your life in a world whose media, when it comes to female sexuality, is definitely a lot less than ideal, so that you can kind of remember that what they think of you does not have to be what you think of yourself, and especially when it comes to something as personal as your sexuality, that can be whatever you want. You can look however you want. So yeah, I'm gonna turn on the music. Hopefully you can hear it. But yeah. If you have any other comments, leave them down below. Thanks, Jen. Thank you. Thanks for coming. All right. Bye.